Hello, welcome to episode 3. Orgasms are for moms too. Yes, they are. I'm here with the incredible Abby Tacon, and she's a peer of mine. She's also a sexpert, and she's a sex and relationship coach. She's also a psychic medium, which is sick. And yeah, we have a coaching relationship. We actually coach each other, and we have a really special bond and relationship. And I just love how we're like opposites in so many ways, but it's so cool to like see how our like opposites intertwine with each other and how we're still so relatable. So, Abby, take it away. Who are you? Let us know.
Hi, so I'm Abby. I am a cisgendered, middle class, able bodied, heterosexual, monogamous white woman. I recognize my privilege in the way that I have the safety of family wealth. So I am very fortunate that I'll never experience homelessness. And I can generally walk through the world without needing to fear for my safety. I'm an Australian. I live on stolen Aboriginal land. And in acknowledgement of that, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of my land, which is the Awabakal people. And I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Amazing. And what about your coaching? Like, let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a sex and relationship coach. I work primarily with mothers. I am a mom of two. I have a 7 and a 5-year-old. And basically, I just help them find themselves after motherhood. It is an enormous transition going from singleton to relationship, long-term relationship, potentially married, and then to have kids. And it puts a huge strain on your relationship, and it completely changes every part of you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I work with mums to help them kind of get back to that baseline. Like I said, you can get really lost. You forget who you are. And I know for me and lots of my clients, like struggling with worthiness and deservingness, like we don't deserve to have time, or we're not worthy of time or space outside of our kids or our relationship. Yeah, and as you mentioned, I'm also a psychic medium. I'm a Reiki practitioner, so I'm a little bit witchy, a little bit woo as well. And I like to intertwine that with my coaching where I can as well.
Yeah, it's freaky. Like she does it on me and then she's like, this is what came in. And I'm like, oh my God, how'd you know? But yeah, I just want to address a few things in your intro. First of all, I just love how you claimed how you're on stolen Aboriginal land. And that is something I need to get better at. I've actually worked on trying to educate myself more in this space. And the few times I've tried to attend lectures and workshops, they actually got canceled. So if you're out there listening to this and you want to be hired to be on this podcast and intertwine Indigenous liberation with sexuality, fuck yes, please call me up. And but I am located in the traditional territories of the, forgive me for this pronunciation, but Nitsitapi Blackfoot Confederacy, and the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, which is where I am at this moment because I'm on the road often. So yeah, I just love our conversations around that and around like the differences in Alberta, or sorry, Canada and Australia, and that it's really interesting to hear because we're both colonized and under the Queen.
Yeah.
And yeah, so thank you for that. And then also, yeah, just like talking about like your cisgender, middle class, able-bodied, hetero, monogamous. We're both white, so we have that in common. But I just love how, you know, you're kind of these societal boxes, but you represent it so well in a sense where like you do the hard work And I know when you talk about your kids and stuff, like never assuming like gender and these kinds of things. And we had this conversation about Barbies the other day, and I like deep Google searched all the new Barbies. I was like, if only, right? So yeah, I just it's really cool how it all intertwines with each other though at the same time. Like I really want to be a mom. That's definitely a goal in my life. And yeah, mothers need orgasms too. Like they are for them as well. So what is it like coaching moms? I'm curious.
Um, I love it. It's just about, there's a lot of like confidence needed, I
Mm,
think, and just
mm,
that like remembering of that you're a whole person. You're a
mm.
whole person before you had kids. And it's really easy to forget that, and to forget it almost feels like two lives. Like you lived this life and then you kind of crossed over into motherhood, and now that life doesn't exist anymore and you're this person. um and that's what happened to me. Like my daughter, so my now 5-year-old, was about 2, and she started sleeping, and I started getting sleep myself, and I kind of was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, like I'm ticking all the boxes, but I'm just not happy. Like I'm just on absolute
Mhm.
autopilot. I've got no idea who my husband is. Like we just kind of like cross over each other and like talk about our kids a lot. And
Mm.
I couldn't remember the last time like I really felt pleasure, whether that was like inside or outside of my body.
Wow.
Um, so a lot of the work I do is just about like that remembering that like you are a whole person, and like yes you are a mother, but you're so much more than that as well. And I feel like it's a real disservice that society has done in the way that we're kind of told that like once you become a mother, like your kids are everything, and you
Yeah.
see it all the time, especially on like Instagram, like mummy influencers, where they're like, my kids are my all, like everything
Yeah.
I do for my kids. And like, yes, like that is great. Like you do need to love your children. Not saying that. But you also need to love yourself and
Totally.
have your whole life outside of it. And like my kids know that I love them and that I'll always be there for them. And it kind of
Mhm.
comes back again to what you were saying earlier, where like, sure, I fit in all these boxes. Like I'm hetero, I'm cisgendered female, blah blah blah, but like my kids might not be in those boxes. Like my kids
Mhm.
might be
Ooh, yeah.
queer or non-binary or any other thing that falls under the entire spectrum of humanity.
Wow.
um
Yeah.
and so like I want them to be in a supportive place where they can just be who they want to be and be who they are and know that like that's
Mhm.
perfectly okay. So like, yeah, like you said, like I don't speak to my kids in genders when I speak about their future. I don't even assume that they're going to have a partner, because you don't need a partner. you know
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
with the Barbies, like my daughter's got like, I hated Barbies. I never wanted them. She
I
really
loved
wanted
them.
them.
I was Barbie obsessed.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I was too as a kid, but then as I grew up, I was like, oh God, no, like I don't want that in my house. Like the like little skinny white blonde hair, like perfectionism in the Barbie. But she's got like wheelchair Barbie, there's non-binary Barbie,
Sick.
there's like curvy, I say that in italic, like
Yeah.
curvy Barbie. There's lots of diverse Barbies, and they're the ones that she has.
I love
Um,
that.
but yeah, so a lot of the work that I do is reminding women that they are so much more outside of just being a mom.
Totally.
And that also like they deserve to have their voice heard, and
Yeah.
teaching them how to do that, like how to
Heck yeah.
express what you want in your need and you need from your partner. And then getting those needs met. And then if they're not being met, like then what do we do?
Yeah.
And just kind of giving them the baseline for like what life should be like and what your relationship should be like in a way that serves them. I'm not pushing my relationship or my life onto
Totally.
them, but just like there's so much more. There's so much more to your life than just ticking boxes and being a mom and letting your children rule every aspect of your life.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I've always said this, that like you come first, then your relationship, then your kids. Because if you go in that order, your kids will just like ebb and flow, and like things will be so much easier. Your relationship will be so much easier. All these things. It's kind of this domino effect. And yeah, like I've often said that to lovers or potential partners, and they're like not having it because they're like, no, 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 kids are first. Like, are you crazy? And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I get it. Maybe like your mom treated you that way, but like that also might be why everyone's fucked up. So
Yeah.
yeah. And I also love how, like, I mean, I don't not work with mothers. I'll totally take a mother client, but for some reason it seems like I'm not taking many on. And even people who aren't mothers, like self-love and you putting yourself first. Like literally my client the other day was like, I want this my part of my life to be about me. Like she's such a caretaker. Like that's
Mm.
all you learn is like the female archetype and the mother. Like you're a mother even if you don't have kids. Like all you do is mother everyone else, fawning, all these things, right? So really, like, what is being a mother, but also what is being yourself, and kind of defining those different things. And I really like what we were just talking about previous to the episode. Yeah, like defining what is a mother. So how do you work with like helping them define who they are and what is a mother to them and such?
Yeah, there's just a lot of exploration. And going back to like real basics, like that's another thing that I think is like, especially me, because I started down this route about 3 years ago. So I was a mother when I first discovered like spirituality, and like my sexuality as an important, like integral part of my being. Like even before kids, I was not at this level of kind of awareness, I guess. And what I was seeing was a lot of like being naked on a beach in Bali for months at a time, and like dropping your entire life and running off to like spiritual retreats. And that's not accessible for me in my life. And it's not accessible for basically any of my clients. Like we struggle to even find an hour in our day to put
Yeah.
towards ourselves, let alone like months at a time. And so a lot of it is like taking these teachings that I've received and then like converting them, I guess, to like mum time and mum language, and really simplifying it to make it accessible and achievable for mums. Because like even I still struggle sometimes with some of the work that I do in like, oh, here's an hour and a half, like, yoni egg practice. And I'm like,
No,
how
I can't even do
how do I fit that in my
that.
day? And so then
Yeah.
I have to sit down and look at it and be like, can I break this up into like 3 half-hour sessions? Like, how am I going to get this done? And so I do that work for my clients so that then I can offer them things that are actually going to be achievable. Like lots of the homework my clients get between sessions is like 15 minutes or less. Because I want it to be actually achievable for them, and kind of taking like those baby steps.
Yeah, I love that, because in my coaching too, like I do find, when you're really committed to this work, it is like it's the hour-long practices and stuff. And that just, I don't know, it just organically does not work for me, even though like I do technically have that time. But it just doesn't work for me. So what I'm all about is, yeah, like let's fit it into your life. Like let's make a like slow life practical transitions, as opposed to like, okay, now you have to like schedule this and such. But I know in your practice you said like scheduling sex is a thing, so maybe we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, like scheduling time for yourself, totally, but also like making it very practical and making it a part of like it's really about changing your whole lifestyle, right? It's like, you go from like eating McDonald's every day to, starting to make time to shop at the grocery store, and then, eat out of the fridge and whatever, right? So it's really about like these slow, practical changes. Would you say that as well in your practice?
Oh, 100%. And when I look at like, even just yesterday, I was looking back on like me 2 years ago. I found a video that I made of myself 2 years ago. And I was like, I'd already come so far, but just like that person is just completely different. And it's like just these baby steps. Like there's no end time of goal. Like it's not like I have to like be this evolved person or be this like fully sexually liberated person
Yeah.
by X date.
Yeah.
it's just on my own timeline. And so sometimes I'm really good and I'm really consistent and I do like my time for myself every day. And sometimes I'm not. And like all of it is okay, because like you said, it's just about like, yeah, finding those little like pockets. But even, yeah, looking back from right now to myself 4 years ago, like just my everything, like my mindfulness even.
Yeah.
And like the places that I find pleasure in, like,
Totally.
and yeah, not like I don't have that like hustle mentality. Like I used to work in like very big jobs and be very committed to those. And it was my whole, before I had kids, that was my whole life. Work was my entire life,
Yeah.
and my relationship, but I worked a lot. Um, and yeah, so now my life's just slower.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get it. It's really about like when you start to like make this not just cognitive shift, but like it changes in your body and it changes your whole lifestyle, right? Like actually, going back to like talking about anti-racism work and such, right? It's like when you learn really about like what racism is and how it's in like your whole system and your being and all these things, and then you start to like see it, you take off, the sunglasses and you start to like see it, and it's like at first it can kind of slam you, but then you realize like, okay, like it's these soft changes that I'm always making, and then like it's really like learning a language. Like you start speaking in that other language, and at first it's not fluent, you're just using words here and there, and then eventually it becomes your whole language, right? So this is really that like kind of transition. And I mean, I see it happen freakishly fast with clients too, right? Like if you commit and you're like want to be here for it, like it freakishly turns over really fast. Like I find it's really also this like getting in your body. Once people really learn how to get in their body and out of their head, this is what it's all about. And I know you do, well, we do the same method or similar in our own ways, but yeah, it's all about getting out of the head and into the body as well. Hey.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing for a lot of my clients, and was a huge thing for me. I suffered from anxiety, social anxiety. Like I pretty much had alienated everyone around me. I had like a couple of friends and that was it. Because I was
Big
just
thing
so,
with motherhood too, hey? It's
yeah,
like
and I was,
in the past, everyone used to like be in tribes together. And now it's like you do everything on your own, and not even with your partner often. Like your partner's just at work and you do everything on your own. Like it's isolating.
yeah, and that was a huge thing because we had quite a few long lockdowns where I
Oh
am,
yeah.
during COVID. And that was a huge thing where people were like, like my kids weren't at school or preschool anymore. Like I lost my job. We were home a lot. And I loved that to an extent, but also it was really isolating. And people were like, well, you decided to have kids. Like you signed up for that. And I was like, no, I signed up for a tribe. Like, and our tribe looks different. Like my tribe looked like daycare and preschool.
Yeah.
And it looked like my friends who also
Love
had
it.
kids that I could go to the park and meet up with.
Yeah.
Um, and things like this. And like the tribe just like vanished. And sure, I chose to be a mother, but I chose to have like outside of my house support for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was a huge thing during
Yeah, I
like
love this. I
COVID
mean,
lockdown
this
for
is
me.
right. Like you choose to be a mother, but you don't choose, your kid to be injured or whatever, right? Like we don't make all these choices, but in Tantra too, I find it's really about, it's not about rolling with the punches. It's about, embracing and finding pleasure and self-love in all of it, and realizing, like the universe does have divine love for us. And I think mothers really like they really like push away that concept. Like it's not for me anymore, it's for someone else, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and going back to kind of, getting out of your head into your body. That's huge for a lot of my clients. And even myself, sometimes it comes up during sex. Like if I haven't had the kind of foreplay that I know that I need, like if I haven't had that downtime after I've put the kids to bed, or haven't had that connection, that non-sexual intimacy with my husband, then I am in my head because I'm like, oh, like the grocery list, or like who needs what in their bag for school tomorrow, or is
Yeah.
one of the kids going to walk in on us? Like, are they
Yeah.
fully asleep yet? Like, are we rushing this like to kind of get it done? like all of these things. And so I see that in my clients a lot. And a lot of the work that I do in that realm is about getting out of your head and dropping into the actual sensation that lives in your body. And I mean, you know all about this. You spoke about it in your like first episode as well, about using like breath and using sound and like really being aware of that sensation and dropping your attention to that sensation. And then moving that like energy around. So, I mean, obviously I start very, very basic of like, what is a sensation?
Yeah.
Like I rub my hands together and I can feel both the skin receiving and giving, you know? I run my fingers through my hair, or just like, what sensation is alive in my body right now? Like I feel like a tightness here or a loosening there, or, you know, and then kind of building on top of that. But I feel like once people get the sensation piece, it's a real kind of awakening.
Totally.
And especially like if you've given birth, you know, like vaginally, then
please talk about this more. And like, I mean, I've never given birth. I really hope to one day. But yeah, talk about this more and like how sensations will change. And I also know there's so much fucking stigma around it. Like the fact that like people think birth is gross, like, oh my God, it makes me so enraged. You have no idea. Like, how can you think how you came into this world is gross? Like, how can you think that? Like, it's just like indoctrinated bullshit. Like, it's just disgusting to think that. And, you know, it's just what we've been trained to do, right? And, you know, they want nothing to do with anything down there. And, you know, the father's not allowed to see, or he'll never have sex with you again. Like all these things go through your head, right? And then like now C-sections are like the thing, and people like actively avoid vaginal births. And yeah, it's just, I mean, I see birth as like the ultimate thing you could do in life. Like I'm just obsessed with it. I would probably be a doula if I'm not doing what I'm doing. But yeah, like talk about like how sensations change, how you kind of have to access, you know, pleasure there after birth, or being pregnant. Yeah.
So I could talk about birth for hours. It's like one of my most passionate topics, I think. I'm a projector in human design, so it also comes with a lot of research. But I love giving birth. So I've done it twice. Both times was in a hospital setting, but with midwives. I don't know how it works in Canada, but I was a very like loving and held thing for me. And it was my first birth like wasn't as like empowering as my second, but it was still incredible. I'm very lucky in that way. And the second time I gave birth was like a full, I like left and like, you know, got my daughter and like brought her down, like and we worked together. It was amazing.
Sick.
And I could give birth like 100 more times, like, but I don't want any more children. I don't want the actual child. I just want the pregnancy and the birth, because it changes you. It's an like for me anyway, it was a massive portal, and like a real like stepping over
the cervix, right? Like the cervix. I mean, when I work with cervical orgasm stuff, it's like the most witchy shit you can work with. And it is an oracle. It is the portal. Like, whoo, oh my God, I'm obsessed.
Yeah. So I mean, again, like addressing my privilege that I have had 2 vaginal births. I had very uncomplicated pregnancies. I had very hands-off labors. My hospital were extremely supportive of everything that I wanted to do. And I had the power within me to be able to voice what I needed and what I wanted. And then that power kind of, I did bend some hospital policies along the way, just because I was not going to stand for it. So I do acknowledge that lots of women don't have that power or that voice, or the like, not education, but the like actual scientific backed research to be able to go in and say like, these are all the peer reviewed studies that I've read, and this is why I'll be birthing in this way and not the way that you're telling me. So that's all I can speak of. I haven't had a C-section or an emergency C-section, so I can't really speak to that experience. But in terms of the changes to your body, like I tore with both of my births. I had stitches. in my perineum, which still sometimes, like my eldest is, my youngest is 5. So like that was 5 years ago, like almost to the day actually. And sometimes if it hits on a bad angle, or if we're not using enough lubricant or things like that still can be a problem area for me. And with my first birth, I tore and it wasn't stitched properly. And I didn't know because I was younger. I just assumed that obstetricians knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And just did what they were supposed to do. And after like, the 6 weeks, when you get like the checkup and you get like signed off, we tried to have sex and it was awful. And so then we waited another 6 weeks and it was still just as painful. And then after, like, my husband's amazing and he was.
And was it painful like in perineum area or deeper or just in general?
It was like central around my stitches, but because they were in my perineum, it felt like, nothing's too much information on this podcast. It felt like shards of glass. And like the stitches were coming, even though the stitches were definitely not there, it was scar tissue, were like coming apart. Just because of the scar tissue and like the deep, like it was really bad. And then I finally saw a good gynecologist who like gave me creams and like helped, and that definitely helped. But because I wasn't aware that any of this could potentially be an issue, I just thought, if you look at the statistics, majority of women, I don't know what the statistic is, and it's different for every region and country. Majority of women do tear in some way and do get stitches. So I just thought it was just a normal thing, and then it just takes a bit of time. But
and what's that saying? Like, it may be normal, but it's common, but it's not like normal. Like, you shouldn't be ripping, obviously, right? And it has to do with fucking pelvic floor education, which I have a pelvic floor course, and I address a lot of this because actually we're way too clenched because our society is so obsessed with tight pussy, and tight pussy comes from men masturbating too much to porn and gripping their phallus and creating like a desensitization in that. And therefore, everyone needs a tight fucking pussy, but actually our pussies are too tight and too clenched, and we actually need a lot more release and functionality and like diverse movement in our pelvic floor. And this is something that like really frustrates me about like we don't have any education on any of this, right? Like we have no fucking clue, right?
No, and you would assume, like, we're told that a tightness in your pelvic floor and tightness in your abdominal muscles while you're pregnant and as you're giving birth is good. But I have friends who are like ballerinas and things like this who had very horrific births because everything was too tight. And you even see it with elite athletes and things like this, that they fall pregnant and they look tiny. Like, you can't really see, like, they don't have the big like pregnancy belly or anything like that. And then they end up either having a C-section or having an emergency C-section. And 9 times out of 10, it would be for that exact reason, that the baby cannot descend. Because everything's just so tight.
And like then you're obsessed with losing weight and like getting back to what you were, when like really like our whole life, our body's always changing, and it's really about embracing that as opposed to like trying to be 20 years old all over again constantly. Like it's just the whole marketing scheme on this just like frustrates me beyond. And it's just so unhealthy, and it's just sad. It just really makes me mourn, and it takes our pleasure away. Like, number one, right? Like, it's taking our pleasure from us and giving it to these diet pill companies or whatever the fuck, right? And it's not even giving it to our partner, and it's not benefiting our children. Like, what the hell, right? So I really love this too. We were talking about like actually wanting orgasms after you're a mom. Like, can you elaborate on this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I breastfed my eldest till he was 18 months when I was pregnant. Then I fell pregnant with my daughter. And then I was pregnant with her. So I was, pregnant with him for 9 months, birthed him, breastfed him for 18 months, fell pregnant again, pregnant for 9 months. And then I breastfed her for 9 months. So that's like like 3 years, maybe longer even, of my body not being my own and being, like milky and like
I can't wait. It's such a turn on to me.
I loved breastfeeding, but I just like I
know
had a
what you
lot
mean.
of
I
it
can
was
imagine.
just like everywhere.
It's
Milk
not just for
was
you,
like
right?
everywhere.
Like at that point, right? So
Yeah. And so like, you're dealing with all these things. Like my body was like stretched. It still is, but I am fine with it now. Like it's been a while for me to get used to that. Like I said, like issues with my perineum and discomfort and pain during sex, and also just sheer exhaustion. Like they don't come with a handbook. You've just kind of got to like nut it out. And the thing that I found in the early days, especially with my eldest, because he was my first, is that like there's constantly something like, you're like looking at the milestones and you're like, oh, and then they'll crawl and then they'll walk. And you're like, okay, well, once they get to this point, like that's got to be it. Right. But and he's 7 now and it just keeps coming. And it's overwhelming. And so
and then they'll be teenagers soon.
Oh my God, don't. I can't even. I've like blanked that part of my life out of my mind. We'll deal with that when it comes. But yeah, like, so, and I found as well, like, because I did breastfeed my kids and I did co-sleep with them, I was the primary parent, because my body was what was sustaining their life, which is fine for that stage. But it disconnected me so much from my husband, because like, even though he is an amazing man and he wanted to help as much as he could, he was so limited in what he could do. Like he didn't lactate. So he was out. And so then I kind of became this unit of like me and the baby. And then it was even more apparent once I had my daughter, because it was kind of like my son didn't need me physically. So like my husband kind of just looked after him. And then I had the baby because again, I was lactating, like I was supporting her life. And so again, you just become this unit of like you and the baby, and you forget that there's like a whole world and a whole relationship and a whole marriage outside of that. So there's kind of that aspect. And then like, I just kind of realized that sex was definitely a chore. Like it was something that I did because I felt like I owed it to my husband. And in saying that though, like before kids, I've always been very sexual. I've always had very good sex. I've always enjoyed it. And then after kids, like it just kind of like rocked us. And we did still have good sex sometimes. Like, if we got that moment where like I wasn't feeling touched out and we'd maybe had some point of connection during the day, then it like wasn't that bad. But ultimately it was a lot of like ticking a box. Like, you're married, this is what you do. And it kind of, there was not a lot of pleasure in it. And he didn't enjoy that. Like he enjoyed the physical act, but then he was like, I don't want this. If you don't want this, like
it's this awkward dance of like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, like, I even have a friend who was telling me about friends she knows, and like how they like they have like an alarm on their iWatch or whatever saying like, okay, you have to have sex with your husband tonight. And their whole concept is like, okay, well, if I don't have sex with my husband at least once a week or whatever, then he's going to leave me and then I'm going to be alone with my kids and right. It's just like becomes this like task to keep your husband, and it's just like totally fucked and it's nothing to do with your pleasure. And then like I can see how you would then like not even care about orgasm or conceptualize it at that point.
Yeah, no, like orgasms, like the least thing, like it's so far over there that it's not even a concept, and I am actually a big advocate for scheduling sex in.
Okay, let's hear about this.
I know
I'm not, so
pre-kids. Oh, actually, do you know what? Like
I don't know if I'm not like possibly there's a time and place to do that or situation, but I'd love to hear, because it's not a typical advice I give to my clients. So I'd love to hear like why.
Yeah. So I was finding that like we were kind of in this cycle of resentment around sex, right? Where like, my husband would like sit next to me on the lounge and like put his hand on my knee and I'd be like, I don't want to do this. And then I just ignore it. And like, then we'd stay out way too late because we're playing that dance of like, if it's late, then I can say I'm tired, and then like we don't have to do this. And then so then it would kind of just, and the whole night was tense because he knew that I knew that he was trying to initiate, and I knew that too, and I didn't want to name it, and you know, like let him down. And it just kind of kept going and going and going. And then he was starting to feel really rejected. And even though it's definitely not a reflection on him, like my husband is like, I hate this, like he's like the unicorn husband. Like he does more around the house than I do. Like things like that are not an issue in our relationship. Like he more than holds his weight. And I was always on the fence about having kids. Like it wasn't something that was like a driving force behind my life. And he really wanted kids. And so one of the things before we had children was that we would split that care as equally as possible. And we do. Very much so even now. So it wasn't like that, like as in like I was just so overwhelmed by the mental load because he wasn't pulling his weight or anything like that. I was just exhausted and disconnected. And so we started scheduling in sex, and I don't remember where it came from for us. Like I think it was just kind of a thing of like, you know, at first, which this sounds awful, but it's true, it was a thing of like, if I knew that on Wednesday at 7:30-ish after the kids were asleep, we would have sex, I would have a whole day to kind of plan for that. So I could like, I'd know like that night we're definitely having sex. And so I could like psych myself up for it.
Or like shave, right, or like, I don't know.
Yeah, but also just be like, okay, like
something that makes you feel good in order to get there.
Exactly. And then it also made us talk about it because this blows my mind, but like long-term couples don't talk about sex much. Even I was watching an episode of Love, Sex and Goop last night, and the very first thing was like that they were talking about was like, what feels good for you when they do it? And the other person had no idea.
I know.
And I was like, I just forget that people don't talk about it. And so it made us talk about sex because so it was like, you know, what do I need from him even before we have sex? Like I need a long downtime at this point in my life. Like I needed to be able to like him put the kids to bed and me have like a nice long bath on my own. And then I needed time for us to talk about our days so that I could get out of my head. And this was before I started doing all of this work. So I didn't have the tools that I have now. But yeah, like, and I needed like a long conversation so that we could talk all of the things out so that then when we got to the bedroom, I was less in my head and could drop more into my body. And that kind of really transformed our sex life.
Wow.
And to an extent, we still do it sometimes, just because we're really busy. And we have really busy lives, but there's a lot more fun and playfulness in it now where like we'll send each other like flirty text messages or like, you know, talk more about like what we're going to do.
I'm gonna rail you tonight.
Yeah. Or like, you know, my husband has done some work with like male tantric sex coaches, and so he'll be like, oh, I want to try this thing or that thing, or like, you know, how like long are we going to have sex for, and like then we can like have like a really nice long like tantric session, things like this.
Like tonight's a quickie, like
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like now that my kids are at school and I work from home, like we can have day sex, which is just like revolutionary because that's my preferred time. But yeah, it's something that, because lots and lots and lots of my clients, I would say almost most, like 99% of my clients, sex is such a huge issue in their relationships.
Totally. I mean, everyone. That's why we have a career.
Yeah. And it's a lot of the time it is like, I'm just so tired. Like, but a lot of the time their partners are also not pulling their weight. And so it's about them figuring out like
your needs. Like,
exactly.
Up for it, like, and calling them in, like calling that divine masculine or divine partnership in, like owning it and be like, you need to show up for me here. Like,
yeah. And just like little, we start with just like little things like, you know, like, so you schedule sex in for that evening. So then he can clean up the kitchen and pack the lunch boxes while you have a nice bath. Like, and then the other thing that I also encourage my clients to do is if sex is a real sticking point, and they're feeling really resentful and they don't want to, then I just encourage them just to take it off the table and work on non-sexual intimacy. Because if you're not feeling connected to your partner, you don't want to fuck them.
I know. Yeah.
Like if you don't remember who this person is, or if you're feeling like resentment or like anger or all of the things towards them, or you don't feel like they're pulling their weight, or you don't feel like they're listening or supporting you, like the very last thing you're going to want to do is like jump into bed with them.
Totally.
And so
like sometimes you have to start up before zero, right? Like,
yeah, and just like spend time with each other and talk to each other and like bring that like, you know, exploration and that playfulness and that connection back into your relationship, and then you can build the sexual intimacy from there. And a lot of what I found in my relationship too is also like redefining what orgasm is for the man, which is a whole like it's a whole separate topic.
Yeah, that's a whole another topic. Yeah, I talked about that a little bit on my episode 1, right? About how like men are like having one orgasm and expanding their view too, right? Is so important. And then you know, learning how to worship each other and how to receive worship. That's a huge thing too. Like there's so many factors here. But yeah, thinking about like scheduling sex, like a couple things that come to mind for me, like one is that like, you know, if you schedule that you have an hour, like that creates much more safety in your mind. So like, I mean, the actual sexual act can take maybe 10-15 minutes, but like, then you can have all this like luxurious foreplay together or whatever, right? Or just like sitting and staring and, you know, this really like going into it properly, and it creates like a much more safer like kind of force field around you to be able to go there and be present and, you know, lock your door and get the to-do lists away and help each other to get out of your head and into your body. It can really, I can imagine how it would be a big like safety. It would bring a lot of safety into the partnership. And yeah, even one of my peers were on a group chat and she was talking about how she scheduled sex with her partner and she like really didn't want to do it all day, but then like, you know, the time came and they just had like this beautiful loving foreplay into it. And she was like, oh my God, I'm so happy I did that. Like it just made my whole day way better, you know? So when you really like surrender into the pleasure here and into like that safety, yeah, I can see how it can really light you up, really.
Yeah. I feel like the other thing that it does as well is like it breaks this expectation that relationships are a fairy tale. Especially hetero relationships are like, you know, you should be like showered with flowers and like you shouldn't have to express your needs or communicate because like your partner should just know what you want. And I find women, especially mothers, just in my lived experience, struggle with that because especially around like milestones like birthdays and Mother's Day and things like this, where they say they don't want anything and their partners take them literally, and then they're so let down and feel so unloved because they haven't expressed their needs. And so a lot of what I do as well is like breaking down that fairy tale. Like your partner is not a mind reader. They're not like a Prince Charming that's here to like sweep you off your feet. And it's like sad to find that out and to really like have that information as like fact and knowledge. And some people like, oh, like scheduling sex is so unromantic, like it takes a spontaneity. And I was like, mate, you haven't had sex in a month. Like, where is the spontaneity?
Yeah,
seriously.
Like,
if you have spontaneity in your relationship and you can just like jump into bed together at any point in the day or night and feel good about it, then like you don't need scheduling sex is not for you. Like this is not for you. Like you just do that.
There's other things for you, you know?
Yeah, but if you're not having sex or sex is a point of contention, then, you know, it's worth a shot, right? And it also, like takes down that fairy tale narrative a bit of just like that I should be able to just jump into bed with my husband at any point and just be like so turned on and ready. And like, sure, sometimes in my life I am like that. Like sometimes I am like that. Majority of the time I'm not, because I know that for me, it takes a lot of warming up And my love language is quality time. And I need that non-sexual, intimate quality time in order to then want the sexual intimacy.
Totally. Yeah, it's like Jaya's work too, like learning like how you're turned on in different ways and such. Yeah. Yeah, and like one of my best advices to people having sex with each other is after you have sex, take the time to talk about your experience. Like one, you decide, okay, who's going to go first? So one person goes, they talk about their experience, good and bad. I experienced this and blah, 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 blah. The other person just listens. They don't make comments about it. They don't be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I did that. I didn't mean to, like none of that, nothing. And they try their best not to take anything personally. And then the next person goes, same exact exchange. You don't say anything, you just hold space for it. And then it's fucking mind blowing how like one experience can be so different for two people who are both in it, right? Mm-hmm. And you just learn so much about your sexual relationship. You learn so much about you as a person, about you, like how someone gets turned on, how someone enjoys something, how someone might not enjoy something, how someone might have enjoyed it last time but didn't enjoy it this time. Like it just really opens that communication and that safety. Like I keep going back to safety because that's like the number one thing. You have to build this bubble to really be fully orgasmic and surrender into that. And yeah, that's one of my favorite advices for people. And, really scheduling that too. Like if you don't want to do it right after sex, like, okay, the next day, like, let's both talk about it or whatever, right? Or send a voice note. There's many ways to kind of do this, but I'd love to hear, like, what is your like main advice for moms? Like, do you have like one or two or three, like main bullet points for moms?
I guess like the first one is just, and I mean, it sounds like something from a Hallmark card, and it's not knowledge that you can just take and be like, oh yeah, but like, you really are worthy and deserving of time and space. And it takes work to get to a point where you know that that's the truth in your mind and in your body. Like that's the work that I do. Like that's what I help women do. But just like there's just so much, and it's a lot of it is like familiar stuff of like, we see like the sacrifice that our grandparents and our parents, like our mothers and grandmothers made, and like, that's what our life should look like. Or we see that like, a woman's place is in the home. And then I think it's really hard for our generation, especially because we're the first generation where working is almost expected of the woman, basically. But the men haven't been taught how to step up and be an equal partner. And so we've kind of like progressed, and women
like
have
women doing even more.
Exactly, because we're like, and
or parents.
As amazing as my husband is, like he does suck at the mental load a lot. And so I find myself having to say like, I can't do this week. Like I'm overwhelmed. I have too much. Like, and I'm the one that's constantly doing all of these parts. And while he's like physically helping by like doing the washing and folding the washing and washing the dishes and blah, 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 there's all of these like things going on in my head that just don't occur to him. And so, I get, so it's like, you are definitely deserving and worthy of time. And you need to communicate in a way that is going to be heard. And so again, I actually have free resources on my website, like a free communication guide. I also coach women through having these conversations. Like once we get to a point in our coaching where they need to have a difficult conversation with their partner about how their needs aren't being met, we go through the entire conversation and making sure, like it's in the right context. Like your husband's not coming home from work and you're like throwing a baby at him and being like, I need some time to myself. Like you're not giving me time and you never do the washing up and like, bye. Like, because that's not going to be received very well, like it would be the same if the situation was reversed. Like worthy and deserving of time, learning how to communicate in an efficient way, an effective way that's going to be heard from your partner. And I also really feel like love languages, I used to think they're a little bit lame, or that like, I don't know, I just had this
I'm the mall.
yeah, I had this like conception of love languages that they were just a bit like, oh,
Yeah.
and then I started looking into them, and
They're like sex coaching, love coach, relationship coaching, like 101, like earlier, like they're like the like least advanced, but also most accessible, I would say.
yeah, and but they just like, we started using them in my relationship, and we noticed like, because well, when we first started looking at love language, like my love language is quality time. My husband's is physical touch. Physical touch was last on my love language. And so that was hard for me, because then I had to, and it also brought up a lot, because like I did work around why physical touch was such a difficult love language for me, and working through like all of those layers as to like what that was bringing up for me, like the fact that I thought that if he showed me physical affection, it meant that I had to give him sex later on, which wasn't true. It wasn't true in our relationship, but it was just a
This is common, actually.
Yeah, and it's like a
like as soon as they touch me, it's like, oh, I'm gonna get some. Yeah. But
yeah.
It's like differentiating touch. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that was just once I figured out that I had that belief and spoke to my husband about it, he was actually horrified. He was like, I just want to kiss you. I just want to touch you. Like, I just want to hug you. And that definitely does not mean that I expect you to have sex with me later on. Like, there's never that expectation. Yeah, but then I found, so I've recently been talking a lot about love languages again, and I redid the test, and physical touch is now second for me.
Cool.
Because in me really committing
shift too. This is a good point, that we shift.
Yeah. And especially like I actually noticed with a lot of my clients and like people in my community, when I was talking about the love languages, they were like, I thought it was this, but then I did the test and it's changed. Like, does that happen? And I was like, yeah, because the last time you did it, you didn't have kids. And so a lot of them were actually used to be physical touch. Now they've had kids, it's swapped to like acts of service or quality time, because like that's the way in that point in their lives that their partners can show them love, by like doing those household chores, or like making them a cup of tea that they can drink while it's hot, by putting down the phone and having a conversation, and not just sitting there and watching TV or something like that. Like, that's what we crave now, versus, you know, before you have kids and you have more time and space to like be physical with each other. And you don't have kids like crawling and touching and, you know, eating, drinking your milk from your body. Like,
yeah, totally. Okay, I have one more topic, and then I'm going to ask you about orgasm stuff. So, should moms self-pleasure? This is one of my main advices for people, is fuck yourself. So
yes, I love that. What do you say? Like, if you can't fuck yourself, then who's going to fuck you, or something like?
If you can't fuck yourself, how the hell are you going to fuck somebody else?
Yes.
It's like, you know, the RuPaul saying. So it's like derived from that. So yeah.
I love that.
But should moms fuck themselves?
Yes. And I talk about this a lot as well. And people are just like, no. And my husband was one of these people where, like when I first found this route of like this journey of kind of like sexual discovery, sexual liberation, it opened me to self-pleasure in a way that wasn't something that I did when my husband was working night shift on my own, and quietly, that I didn't share.
If you do our coaching problem, you have to fuck yourself a lot.
Oh yeah. So
2
much.
years of fucking yourself straight.
Oh my gosh.
I actually complain about fucking yourself.
Yeah, no, I definitely did. I took like a week off because I was just like, no, I'm done with this for now. And so like you actually spoke about this in your episode 1 that I listened to the other day. And I know that it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but like the more orgasms you have, the more orgasms you want, basically. Yeah. Like there is a whole lot of science and shit that goes underneath that.
It manifests more orgasms when you orgasm.
Yeah. And so my other thing with like, especially mother self-pleasuring, is I find in a lot of my clients that they're coming to this place where they're like in their early 30s. They had no sex education. Their parents never spoke about sex. Lots of them went to like religious-based high schools, things like that. Yeah. And there was no self-exploration. The internet was just becoming a thing as we were finishing, like, because I'm 34 33. I'm 34 in a few weeks. Like, so the internet was like a really big thing kind of as I was finishing high school, like going to university around that like 18, 19-year-old, which gave us access to a fuck ton of porn. And so it's like, we know nothing about sex. There's like porn on tap. We watch that. That's what sex should be, apparently. So then we perform as that for years. And our partners expect that too, because they've also watched a fuck ton of porn. And we don't actually know what feels good to us or what we like or what we want or what sex even means.
Yeah.
Then we have kids. And then we realize that there's a lot more to life than what we're living before. And we're like I said, like early to mid 30s, have no idea what feels good to us, have no idea what sex means, have no idea who our partner is anymore. And so self-pleasure is the thing that's going to like root you into all of that. So as you explore your own body, you can be like, that feels good, that doesn't, I like this, I don't like that. It's so much more than just lying on your back with a vibrator on your clit.
I know. It makes your whole sex life and relationship better. Like,
yeah, and it's the place, like, it's like the gateway to exploration of your body. Like, you know,
and
like
it's the gateway to the relationship with your body, being in body, processing your trauma. Like, yeah,
and like, and use it to explore what does feel good to you and what you do like, you know, different positions that you can use, different types of toys, different like temperatures and touch. Like, does breast massage feel good? Does it not? Why or why not? Like, do I like my nipples touch like this or like that? Like, does
and is it actually a no, or is it a maybe? Or maybe it's just a no because I haven't like spent time nurturing it and like loving it and creating safety around it, right?
Yeah. And then the more you explore in that way and the more you like open up your sexual repertoire with yourself, then the more confidence that you build to be able to go to your partner and say, like, I tried this thing and I really liked it. Like, could we try that together in this way? Or like, I really like it when, like, you know, my yoni is massaged in this way and I've really explored it. And this part of my body I don't like that being explored in a sexual way. Like, and that's a boundary that I'm putting in place. And then, so not only are you opening up your body and your pleasure and the touch and the sensation, but you're also opening up those lines of communication. Because the more sexually confident you are, like the more open you are to talk about that as well.
Yeah. And you're making more, you know, pathways to pleasure as well, like the whole nervous system. So on that note, what was your first orgasm? Do you remember? Do you have any idea?
Yeah. So I totally remember. So I went to a really strict Christian school. I didn't even kiss a boy until I was 18.
Okay.
Yes. And it was like a big deal. And it was very like, I had to work through a lot with that. I didn't really do much self-work back then, but like work through it without knowing that I was working through it, of like, you know, because I was told that like sex is for marriage and I had no sexual education. It was basically like you have sex once and you fall pregnant, like, and then that's your life, you know? So I was terrified because I definitely knew I didn't want kids at that point. Anyway, and I thought that we were having decent sex and I thought that I'd had an orgasm. That relationship only lasted 6 months. And then I met an older man. He was like, I was 18. I think he was like 26.
Okay.
So like knew how to please a woman, and holy shit. Like he just like opened up my orgasmic world in so many ways. And he was like, I remember
sending thanks.
Oh man, all the time. And he was like so like in awe of me because I'd never actually experienced orgasm, and I was so like fresh and open and surrendered to him that like he was just amazed at like the things that he could make my body do, because he was used to being with like, I guess, older women at that point who were like, either because I hadn't also watched porn or anything, because you know porn's a devil in the Christian world. So I was just completely fresh and new, and he basically taught me like everything, and it opened my body up to so many sensations. So I can't remember like the exact first orgasm, but I just remember everything just being like electrified, like every touch, like everything. So yes.
Yeah.
That's kind of Yeah, but yeah, my first, like what I thought was my first orgasm was definitely not my first orgasm.
Yeah, I think that's, very common actually. Yeah. And, and then, once you get into Tantra, you're like, wait a second, I was only having those orgasms. What the fuck?
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear like how you define orgasm for yourself, for your world. Yeah.
So like there's obviously, and again, you speak a lot about this in episode 1, but there's a lot of different definitions of orgasm. But for me, orgasm is about connection. When I was really thinking about this yesterday, I was like, yeah, it's about, I use it to connect with, on a like woo spiritual level, like connect with my higher self, connect with like the divine universe. But then it also anchors and connects me into my body, and it also connects me with my partner on both a physical, like spiritual, emotional level as well. Yeah, so that's what orgasm is to me. It's like the root of connection.
I love that. I love that. And so you would agree that it's more expanded than this like Western definition of like the clitoral orgasm.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I'm not like, I don't discriminate against orgasms. Like if you're not having orgasms and you can then learn to achieve a clitoral orgasm, then like through use of like some kind of vibrator, like power to you. Like
totally.
But I do feel like there are different grades of orgasm, I guess, depending on what you want. And also like in my own practice, sometimes I just need that like release of a quick like clitoral orgasm.
Totally. Yeah.
Sometimes I need an hour to like breathe and expand and like almost like I'm on psychedelics, like you've spoken about this too, but like sometimes that's what I need. Yeah, like sometimes me and my husband just need a quickie, like just as like a sexual release. And sometimes we need like 2 hours of like really deep connected like tantric sex. So I feel like as well, like orgasms definitely have multiple uses and levels and things like that as well.
Love it. See, a fellow sexpert said it. So Abby, I would love it if we could just do like a couple minutes of embodiment here. How does that sound? Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. Maybe take a sigh. You can let that exhale kind of move your body, and exhale whatever you need to. And I'm just going to invite your hands wherever they desire to be on your body at this moment. Maybe they can even be together. Just where do they want to land organically? And just taking a couple inhales as you feel this expansion in your torso. And exhale, releasing whatever you need to in this moment to create a bit of clarity and a pathway. And in this pathway, I invite you to invite your orgasmic energy, the oracle of your orgasm, into your body, wherever it may land. Letting it land in the body, and then asking it, does it have any messages for you about orgasm moving forward in your life? And I would love to invite you to share where it landed and what the message is, and feel free to take a moment to listen.
Yeah, so it definitely lives in my cervix as like a snake that kind of coils up and then moves around as the energy moves. And the main message that it had was like seek more orgasm. Yeah, because I'm not always perfect in my practice and in consistency because life. But yeah, it's definitely a beautiful reminder to go back to consistent practice and back to that point of connection.
And let's just take a moment to offer compassion to that inconsistency, to yourself, in not needing to be perfect and just letting it be what it is, if it's even inconsistent. Just offering a bit of compassion there. And then offering gratitude to this serpent in your cervix. Ooh, I love serpent energy. And just slowly coming back to this space whenever you're ready. Ooh. So witchy. I love the cervix for that. So, is there any last thoughts you need to say? Anything else you need to bring here before we wrap this up?
I feel like that was a pretty decent representation of my life as a mother and a sexual being and in a long-term hetero relationship, and kind of what I aspire to teach women or bring them home to, I guess, is better rather than teaching. But yeah, I'm just really grateful to be able to do this work, and also going kind of, yeah, tying everything back together is like ultimately a lot of it is for my children, because I want them to be able to live a different life to what I had.
Yes.
Yeah, and just have a more tolerant society, more accepting society, and a more empathetic society. And so
Yeah.
by me speaking to my children in the way that I do and educating them in the things that I do, then hopefully that kind of ripples out.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, this concept of like having compassion for others, even if you don't understand their personal experience through yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it has been such a pleasure. It's been orgasmic. And if you want to hit Abby up, you can find her on Instagram at Abby Tacon, Tacon. Sorry, Abby, ABB dot TACON, or at abbytacon.com. So that's ABBTACON.com. And go schedule sex. Go,
only if you're
get
not
it.
having it. Only if you're not having it.
Or schedule sex with yourself too. That's not
Yes.
just with your partner. Schedule it with yourself, because sex is not just P and V with, yeah.
Whole other episode.
Yes. And orgasms are for moms too. Like, fuck yeah. Orgasms are for fucking moms too. They're for everyone. And thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed and can't wait to chat again. Mwah. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.